Serious. What's the most terrifying encounter with an insect you've ever had? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Like 15 years ago, I got out of my car at the grocery store. I walked halfway across the parking lot and noticed a praying mantis standing in the middle of the asphalt. I stared at it for a good 30 seconds and was thinking it looked pretty cool. I took a slow step to get a bit closer, and that mother lover charged me. It ran up my pant leg toward my face, and I batted it away, only to have it charge again. I ran like a coward to the store and to safety and didn't see it again. Mantises are beautiful, but they don't fuck around. I was at an amusement park called Santa's Village as a kid, and I saw a bee fly into my Sprite, and then I started choking on a hot dog. No one knew I was choking, and I started to panic. Then I just watched that goddamn bee enjoying my Sprite like he owned the fucking thing. So anyway, I tried really, really hard and figured out how to swallow that chunk of hot dog and survived. I almost just died, and my family were annoyed that I was like sobbing and making weird coughing noises and stuff. I couldn't believe that no one gave a shit. So anyway, the bee flew off, and I took a big sip of Sprite and went on with life, like we goddamn middle kids do. Lying in bed, reading the book John Dies at the End, which features quite a few horror elements. It's pitch black except for my iPad, and that's when a large spider walked across the screen. Took everything I had not to throw the iPad. Even weirder, the sequel is called The Book is Full of Spiders. Preface. I am terrified of wasps. A wasp once crawled into a can of Pepsi I was drinking and ended up in my mouth. I remember feeling something odd. Spat out my drink and a wasp landed on the floor. Next thing, my dad had his shoe off and smacked it quicker than I thought possible. A fly went in my ear canal. For about 30 minutes, I could hear the flapping of its wings with a crazy sound magnification. It honestly felt like the flapping was inside my brain. The weirdest feeling. And then it suddenly stopped. The fly had died, and then easily came out. The brood X cicadas were literally everywhere when I was at the zoo in June. They were a decent size, and when there are hundreds of them flying around you and landing on you, it is so scary. I don't know. My brother had to keep knocking them off of me because I literally froze in fear if they landed on me, lol. Taking a late summer walk down to a convenience store. The night was hot, clear, and just a touch humid. Perfect walking weather. Just as I get to the convenience store, I feel a bug land on me, and figure it's just a mouth fluttering around. I swat it away and walk inside. When I step inside, I look up into the security monitor and see a dark spot on my shoulder. As I look down to see, a huge cockroach flutters its wings in my face, but doesn't fly off. I shuddered and started to freak out, but took a step back outside the store before fully losing my shit. Jumping about, slapping at my shoulder, head, neck, and freaking out over this roach. For context, I come from a part of the world that doesn't have cockroaches, and had very little experience with them until I moved to that country. I had a huge red paper wasp inside of my beekeeping veil about an inch in front of my nose one time, which was pretty intimidating. This happened to be about 10 minutes after I had just laughed my ass off at a drunk guy who was working the bees with us that day, who had ripped his veil off in a cloud of 1,000,000 bees because one got inside his veil. I managed to walk calmly out of the cloud of bees and got my veil off, but it was pretty scary. I was camping and had to pee in the middle of the night. I walked up to a tree with a headlamp on and felt a damn moth fly right into the side of my face. Went back to the tent, then I heard a thup 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 sound and realized he was in my ear canal. Other people camping tried to suck him out with a straw or grab him with tweezers, but he was too deep. I eventually fell asleep to the sound of his wings flapping. When I woke up, there was no more flapping. Hopefully, he made it out somehow. Alright, long story. I was minding my business, going to take the clothes out of the washing machine, open the lid and go to reach in when a spider jumps and spreads its legs wide. Not just any spider, but a freaking 4-inch wide spider. I'm cool with snakes, mice, even little spiders, but big spiders scare the crap out of me. So, in all the swearing that ensues, my 12-year-old daughter comes down and quickly nopes the fuck out of there. So I make her get her 10-year-old sister and offered $5. She's all like, yeah, I got this. Then sees it and also decides it's not worth it. So I make them get their 13-year-old sister. I offer the same money and she's like, yes. So I tell her to carefully come look at it first. She starts reaching in there with me right there. I ran to the other side of the house and she just casually walks out with it squished in the paper towel, which I tell her to put in the garbage outside. She has autism and could care less about bugs, thank God. I upped the amount to $10 after she already did it, and it was totally worth it. LOL. It was a dark fishing spider. So gross. Laundry makes me nervous now. A toss-up between the time I was watching TV and heard the pitter-patter of a large spider run across the floor, or the time I took a shower and found only half of a freshly killed grasshopper in my hair. That time I walked through a spider web in between my cars in the morning as I was leaving for work. I thought it was just a web until I got 3 miles down the road and the fucking spider crawled down my forehead. I was so damn terrified that I swerved straight into the car beside me, spun out, and went into the other side of the road and got struck by an oncoming car. Policeman didn't believe a word of what I told him about the spider and gave me every sobriety test he could, even after I blew a .00. Finally got down with everything and had my wife come get me. While they were loading the car on the back of the wrecker, I saw the damn spider crawling across the inside of the windshield, basically giving the big ol' F you. I fucking hate spiders. Left the windows cracked when returning from lunch to work. Came back, proceeded to drive home. 3/4 of the way, I noticed the sun visor move a bit. Kept driving. Maybe it's just a little loose. I'm jamming, listening to music, and when a giant praying mantis slowly emerged from the sun visor, huge. It comes down like a scene from one of the Alien movies, right at eye level, just gazing at me. I managed to pull into a parking lot, open the door, and knock it out of the car. But man, that was scary. It left a huge egg sac wedged between the visor and roof liner. I went outside on a very muggy day to sit on the front porch swing, looked down and saw a very large spider and a wasp locked together in mortal combat. The spider had half consumed the wasp, but the wasp was still alive and writhing, trying to sting the spider. It was utterly repulsive. Got up, went back inside. About half an hour later, because it was so freaking hot indoors, I went to the side door to sit on the stoop, shaded by the carport. Looked down by my foot, and the same fucking spider-wasp monstrosity had crawled all the way around the house and was right there. It was almost as if I was watching some kind of cosmic elemental battle to the death that only I was fated to see. You know how you sometimes see something so fundamentally icky to your soul that it gives you the shudders? I hightailed it back inside and scrubbed my hands with cold water for several minutes in an effort to calm the instinctive revulsion. Like a year ago, I had my bedroom invaded by some insects that are very common in summertime in my country, basically ants with big-ass wings. My entire life, I have always been very scared of insects, and my bedroom was absolutely infested. Ended up having to sleep in the living room for a month until the situation was taken care of. I used to be able to live with those bugs, but after that, just seeing a picture of them is enough to make me flinch. If we're counting arachnids, probably the time I had a tick lodged in my ear. The old lady who tweezed it out exclaimed it was the size of Tennessee, which was probably as disturbing as the experience itself. If we're counting arthropods, probably the gigantic house centipede I hunted down with a Swiffer while outrageously high, the thing of nightmares. If we're being pedantic, probably the time my brother stepped in an underground bee nest. While I escaped unscathed, they absolutely swarmed him and covered him in stings. His legs looked gross. I have a terrible phobia to this day, and I panic in BE situations. My former stepfather had a cousin in some sort of institution. The story was that when he, the cousin, was a toddler, I'm using the vernacular that was used when the story was related to me, went mad. From being cognitively perfect to completely nonverbal, violent, and never developed further neurologically. Apparently, after 3 to 4 days, it was found that the poor kid had a bug in his ear, and the noise or pain had sent him insane, given that he was unable to convey exactly what was wrong. This story was told often in the family, of how this dear boy had never grown up, and his parents were unable to cope with him. This was in the 1940s or 50s, and so he was put into an institution for the rest of his days. When I was in my early 20s, I had a moth go in my ear, and it was the most horrendous experience of my life. I could feel or hear the fluttering, It was incredibly painful, and all I could think was how that poor kid had gone literally insane from the same thing. I woke my mother, it was about 2 a.m. when it happened, by screaming in terror and pain. We both knew the story well, and we were both panicking. She ended up ringing the emergency line, who told her what to do to drain my ear of the moth, which worked, thankfully. The logical side of me knows that most of my terror came from knowing the fate of my ex-stepfather's unfortunate cousin, but now, some 20 years later, I will not let anything near my ears that I don't know about. I can still feel that fluttering, still feel that sheer panic and desperation as I wondered if I, too, was about to slip into madness. I was carrying my 5-month-old baby on my front porch without any shoes or socks. I was just trying to get her some fresh air. My cat was under my feet playing with something, and all of a sudden I felt something tickling my foot. I assumed it was my cat, but I looked down and it was a giant spider. It was also super angry from just getting batted around by a cat. It bit my foot, which actually didn't feel like anything. I had to calmly try and kick the spider off of my foot because I was carrying my baby. Got back inside and saw the bite was swelling. Half of my foot got pretty big. Ended up fine after a couple of days. Walking towards my front door, and I looked down at my purse to dig my keys out. When I look back up, I'm less than 6 inches from walking face first into a 3-inch long Orb Weaver Spider sitting in the center of its web. It was exactly at my eye level. I threw myself backward so hard I slipped and landed flat on my back underneath the spider. I crab scrambled backwards until it was safe, then got up and used the back door. I have another one that isn't actually mine. My husband does work on top of roofs sometimes, and one time he was at the top of a 20-foot ladder. He got stung by a wasp. He said he had to calmly climb down the ladder and then proceed to freak out at the bottom. If he had panicked at the top, it could have been horrible. First, I used to live in a townhouse with a few big trees out in the front yard. One was pretty close to the front door, and the sidewalk to the driveway kind of curved around it. One fortunate night, I was walking to my car and decided to take a straight route, which meant I went off the sidewalk. It was dark. Sure as shit, I walked into full 7-foot ground-to-tree branch spider webs. Spiders would make these at night, and I knew about them but never expected to walk through one. I felt the spider on my shirt. It was in the middle of the huge web waiting for me, and panic flipped it off of my shirt and ran back inside the house and essentially stripped and showered. Second, now I may have been high. This one isn't so much as terrifying as it is odd. I was in my room on the computer just minding my own business when I noticed movement. Junebug. Big fucker. It had found its way into my sanctuary and I wasn't happy. For whatever reason, I decided to yell at it like a madman. It worked. I scared this roach into a corner of my room, near the ceiling. It climbed the wall and was above me, and felt satisfied. Literally, a half a second later, this fuck drops down to the ground, runs at me, skirts around my leg, and bites me on the ankle. It didn't last much longer, as I smashed it with my book I had in my hand, but still, kudos on that fuck for going out with a bang. When I was 6 years old, we had a dog that lived outside. One night, I went out to feed him, and unbeknownst to my younger self, there were about 10 huge cockroaches just going to town on his food bowl. I'm visually impaired, so I couldn't see them until it was too late. I reached for the bowl, and they all rushed me, crawling all over the bowl and my hands. I froze in absolute terror and dropped the bowl, scattering kibbles and bugs all over the porch. They all scattered, and I ran inside scared shitless. We just moved into our newly built house, brand new carpets in our bedroom. There's something on the floor that I step on, then reach down to pick up, and it was a spider, but it had all the little baby spiders attached, and they took off in all directions. Thank God my husband thought quickly and grabbed the vacuum cleaner. I had a hard time going to sleep that night. So I'm allergic to wasps, and one day driving my coach down the motorway to London, I had a wasp land on my arm whilst I was driving at 62 miles per hour, 100 kilometers per hour. So I slowly and frighteningly put my arm out the window to get it off, and the bugger would get off my arm somehow. It was like it was glued to my skin. So I shouted my nearest passenger to come over. He did, and he leaned around the back of the chair and flicked the wasp off my arm and out the window. Not gonna lie, all the poo came out of my anus. Ugh. I was 4 years old in the back seat, and my mom was driving with the windows cracked. The largest, creepiest wasp I've ever seen in my life flew straight in and kept flitting around and then landing on my face. I couldn't move, I was so scared. My mom rolled the windows all the way down, but the damn thing wouldn't leave. I just had to sit there with this bastard crawling all over my face and wait for it to get bored or sting me. Thankfully, it finally left after what felt like an eternity. The one time I decided to actually work out. For some context, I live in a basement where it tends to flood badly during storms. I decided one day that, hey, I have the space and the resources too, so why don't I work out in my room? So I began to get ready and prep myself to do a light workout. At the time, I didn't have a yoga mat or any carpet, so I was doing this on cold, hard tile. I began working out, and eventually I decided to do sit-ups. So I lay down and try to do some when out of the corner of my eye, I see something small and dark running or crawling at me. I immediately jumped up and realized it was a centipede as it crawled away to who knows where. Don't know what kind, but I've been scared of them since I was a kid because my mother told me they were poisonous and could harm you. Lost the bastard, but I put down a trap and caught it the next day. I have many, but I'll go with the worst. I used to be terrified of praying mantises, mostly because deep down my dad is a small child and would sometimes act more like an older brother than a parental unit. My dad absolutely loves praying mantises and has on multiple occasions expressed that one of his greatest wishes is that praying mantises would be the size of cows. I don't share his enthusiasm. As soon as my dad realized I was afraid of mantises, he made it way worse by chasing me with them. He'd knock on my window with a mantis in his hand, find one when we were sitting outside, and chase me to my room where I'd lock myself in, but we both knew how to pick the lock. One time I locked myself in my mom's car, but he realized the keys were in the house, so as he went to get them, I took off running barefoot and crying down the street, waited for a bit, then entered the house again, only after being told a million times by both my parents that he didn't have the mantis with him anymore. This was about 17 years or so ago, and I'm pretty much over the fear. There's actually currently a mantis sitting outside the window right behind me that's been living there for weeks now that I say good morning and good night to every day. I've also held one, brought it inside for the night, and taken it back out in the morning. I don't think the problem was that I had some huge fear of the various critters I was afraid of, mantises, lobsters, a scorpion preserved in a paperweight that I was convinced had moved. It did. It was the fact that they were shoved at me instead of me being able to get comfortable with them on my own. I also had a fly infestation in my room that was very Amityville-esque, and one time a cicada flew in my mouth. Okay, I've babbled enough now.